Morning!
Madnin!
Welcome to the India Explained podcast, recorded in London and San Francisco. One take, unscripted, no rehearsal.
Hey Bunty, greetings again and welcome back to our listeners. Second episode today, this Sunday, November 12th. So I trust wherever you are in the world, you're able to breathe sort of freely and easily. And Bunty, you and I both live in industrial/post-industrial cities really, which I'm sure, have their problems with pollution. But we, regularly have spare air days here in San Francisco, but nothing like what's going on in Delhi. So,
Correct.
I think it's an international story. People know how horrible the air quality is. The air quality index is kind of, the numbers are just off the charts. There are several scores, if not hundreds of times, what, above or worse than what the prescribed safety standard is. A couple of airlines like United have cancelled flights, etc. So, and there's the usual sort of blame game about, who's to blame, whether it's cars, whether it's stubble of crops that are being burnt in Punjab and Haryana. But without further ado, I thought let's do this. We'll hear from our man, Ayush Soni on the ground in Delhi. And Ayush has an interesting take on the political reaction to the events. So we hear from him, and then Bunty, you can just take it from there. All right?
Okay.
So, the smog has returned to Delhi for another year. Air pollution levels are shooting through the roof. Schools are being shut and people are being advised to stay indoors. In public discourse, however, political parties and their spokespersons are saying, well, let's not try and politicize the issue. But here's the thing, why shouldn't a civic issue as grave as this, which affects our daily lives almost every single day, be part of political debate? Why shouldn't political parties talk about this? I think they absolutely should talk about it, should debate it, should discuss it furiously, so that only then will real solutions to a growing urban problem will emerge. By saying that this shouldn't be politicized, political parties are actually running away from the issue and stalling all possible chances of real solutions to it.
Okay, I think one of the things that we heard from that report was Ayush basically outlining the framing of it, which is that, why can't we talk about something through the political rubric, given that it affects everybody's lives. I have seen a lot of visuals on media. I have exchanged a lot of messages with friends who are in Delhi. It is truly horrible, to be breathing kind of air and there's some kind of count where it's 400, 600 numbers are being thrown around. I don't know what those numbers mean, but it basically means that what was bad has gone worse, and what is like beyond the World Health Organization health limits. And then there's this reason that, whether it's being done because of a seasonal crop burning exercise that happens in the northern states, and whether there is any alternative to doing that. I think the basic problem that Delhi has is that, and people will not recognize this when you speak to them when in the city, but from outside the city, public transportation is questionable quality, even Delhi Metro being in place. Delhi is a very status-conscious city where people love their cars, and it has always been the case that, unlike in certain cities like Bangalore, Bombay or Calcutta, where, taking public transportation is not seen as a sign of weakness, it's seen as a part of kind of civic routine. In Delhi, it's seen as a social failure that you're taking a blue line or red line bus, right? And, to have a car and to use it is your first step up, or a two-wheeler. So I'm going down the road that, Delhi is a consumerist city. It likes to consume stuff. And part of that consumption is buying cars, and that contributes a lot to the pollution. That would be my first observation. The crop burning thing, Rohit, is completely new to me. I haven't been aware that happened in the northern states, and that I saw a map on BBC's World Service the other day. There was a map from a satellite imagery map which showed parts of northern India completely fogged up, and that contributed. I always know that when I'm planning flights into Delhi at this point in the year, I always allow enough
crazy,
time so that, in case there are fog-related delays, I can. But I don't think it's a simplistic thing of, political parties making their minds up and people doing things, because I think fundamentally, however many citizens of Delhi, or let's call it the citizenry of Delhi, have to give up their love for motor cars and embrace walking, cycling, and other kind of, or taking public transportation, because like is the case in any other great metropolis, right? So driving that up could be an answer to reducing pollution, because in the middle, the Aam Aadmi Party's Chief Minister Kejriwal did this odd and even number things. Like some days you could go out with the odd number, and that worked very well. It was a pilot scheme, and I'm just thinking, what stops him from kind of bringing that back wholesale to detract from this love of cars, which is kind of tied into status and show off panti. Over to you. What do you think?
Well, you've raised a couple of very important points. I think, to do with public transport and to do with culture. And I think there is no easy solution to it. So there are three sort of larger issues concerned here. And this is a problem that is not just I'd say it's a Delhi problem, a city problem. I'd say it's a regional problem, and then it's a national problem. And I'll point to three main factors. One, I just think, is from a long-term perspective, it's a complete failure of a kind of post-colonial model of development that, whether it is people on the left or it is people on the right, agriculture is kind of a issue around which there is tremendous political capital to be generated. Now, I'm not of the school of thought which says that, in the manner of technocratic economists, you should embark on massive social engineering programs to relocate people or, completely sort of revamp their livelihoods or just throw them, in the deep end. But there is something to be said for the fact that over a period of time, you need to move larger sections of the population away from agriculture to, other forms of the economy. I understand that if they move to industry comes with its own problems. But, this is not something that we've been talking about for 5 or 6 years. We've had 50 years to think about this. And on this issue, I would say that, the blame lies with all parties, and perhaps the lion's share of the blame does go to the Congress because, they've dominated, sort of politically for most of the last 6 decades. So, if, given the reality of agriculture, again, why not have some, alternate mechanisms for disposing this waste in place? You will create new industries, and India can absorb the cost, I'm sure. I will say here that I think it was IIT Delhi that produced a very good paper, which came up with very good solutions, and that paper apparently has just been lying buried with nothing being done. So, we are fortunate in India that we actually have a lot of very good qualified minds working on a lot of subjects. And you need people, you need agricultural economists, you need, labor economists, you need technologists who are working in the context, in the Indian context. Not someone who, swoops down from MIT and comes and gives gas. But we have those people. We have those incredibly qualified people, sharp people, but, their ideas don't translate into governance. Second point, you're absolutely right about Delhi that, I remember the time when cars were first introduced, the Maruti was first introduced, and at Pragati Maidan, there used to be something called the India International Trade Fair. And I was a young schoolboy then, and I've always loved cars. So I do actually have memories of seeing the prototype of, the Maruti 800. And I remember those, Delhi Panjus, getting excited about the Marutis and then, having those horrible stickers, shiny stickers saying, "It's Rahejas," with the apostrophes all messed up at the back. So the cars have been status symbols. And, every Panju must have, Panju including the, post-partition refugees success stories must have their big 3-storied koti with, a couple of illegal extensions and 4 cars. The problem also has to do with development. Delhi has itself developed in such a nasty, haphazard way, particularly the Trans-Jamuna area, that it's practically impossible to think of a kind of logical and systematic grid of public transport. So yes, there is that dimension of status and class for a lot of people, but there's also the fact that, a lot of other people who couldn't afford cars, even if it cost them a lot of money, they would have to spend a good chunk of their salaries on the auto rickshaws, which, also add to congestion and so on. Certainly when I lived in Delhi, I used to take buses to work, but I also had to take a good amount of auto rickshaws. The final point I'm going to make is that even if there's been a lot of back and forth about, the Aam Aadmi Party, he was supposed to add 3,000 buses, but they only added 800, and how much credit should go to BJP and how much credit should go to AAP. But it's not just a question of putting buses on the ground. There's also the question of public culture in Delhi, right? I mean, we know how difficult public transport is for women. We know how difficult it's for elderly citizens. As someone who was a high school student in Delhi, I mean, and even someone who worked there, those white line, red line buses, even DTC buses, it was sort of horrible getting on them, really. And I just think of people who had to do that every day. It's a form of battle. So until you also, have a transformation of public culture, and I admit I have no idea how that would take place, you're not going to get a lot of people to really travel by public transport. I mean, and why would you? Why would you? That unless you had to, if you were a woman, why would you want to travel on public transport when large sections of the Delhi population just see it as kind of a, free space for molesting away? So, and then of course there's also the question of bus routes and the politics of that, all of that, that people in certain neighborhoods may not want, metro stations being built right where they are and so on and so forth. I don't know how much clout they have in Delhi to stop that. But,
as you've called it, it's a complex one. On the back of a 10-15 minute conversation, we're probably not going to find a silver bullet to this. But what we wanted to do was there are different layers of motivations that run into this. One is political responsibility, social responsibility, infrastructure, all of those kind of things contribute. Now you will say, okay, so we are holding up the problems. What is the solution? And I think my read on it, Rohit, is I think the solution is more a social solution than a political solution, because Aam Aadmi Party is a seasonal party. Whether they come back again or not, God only knows, right? So the question is the politics will keep changing. The infrastructure will probably move at a marginal rate because, in 70 years of independence, Delhi has obviously the most progressive infrastructure in place because it's the national capital. So my leaning would be that, how do you get behavior change to happen among citizens in Delhi, irrespective of where they are in the pecking order, whether it's a question of safety, whether it's a question of status, those are things need to be there. So my short take on it would be the challenge is to enable people to behave differently rather than, because I think obviously if you had a magic wand, infrastructure would appear in a blink of an eye. If you had a magic wand, you had an efficient political system. But I don't think that will happen, and I think the answer lies with the people, is my take on it.
Right, and I would agree with you, but again, just to push on that a little further, the idea here is who is the people, right? And I think that, here, a couple of things. One is that the people, the elected representatives of the people they really have a responsibility here, and even among people, if you are relatively privileged, depending on your degree of privilege, you really should be doing something more, right? For so many people, and fine, I don't want to romanticize someone just because they are, in a sort of relatively lower income status. I think that's kind of a tendency that a certain kind of Indian left discourse has. But at the same time, if someone is just, millions of people live in very, very difficult conditions, and that sort of manifests itself in all kinds of ways. But if there's people who are just, struggling to make a living, you drive through Delhi at 4 a.m. and you see a vendor wheeling a cart. And this is a guy who's probably, wheeling his cart for a few miles every morning. Because what do you move that cart on to, find a location which is, going to make him a little bit of money as profit at the end of the day. People who live in those conditions, how can we expect them to, maybe take up a cause like pollution? This is another thing. And, outrage on Twitter does serve a purpose, but in terms of, organizing or activism, maybe I'm again not even talking about maybe you're like average upper middle class person, but I'm saying that, it's also a city with so many powerful, influential people. Like, why don't any of them take it up, even if they want to do it just as a kind of fashionable cause? That leads us into this whole other sort of question of how, celebrities or prominent Indians should sort of relate to political and social issues. But then the other thing I will say is that, the response of the politicians, all of them, has also been profoundly dismaying to me. Arvind Kejriwal is begging the Chief Minister of Punjab, Amarinder Singh, on Twitter that, "Arey yaar, listen to me, boss, let's have a conversation." That guy's giving him the brush off. saying that, I have responded through official channels, maybe Modi should intervene. The BJP is feeling delighted that, this is something that can be lumped on the Aam Aadmi Party. Everyone is saying that, the central government needs to do something. It's national policy. And then there's, the usual sort of clown show. There's some character called Tejinder Bagga. I mean, he's the Delhi BJP spokesperson. He's a prize fool. I mean, I've had a, unpleasant encounter or two with him on social media. But he's someone who's actually, rewarded by the BJP for being allowed and for, among other things, I'm pretty sure, assaulting Ram Bhushan. When the Supreme Court had said they were going to ban crackers, he said that I will violate the ban, I will defy the ban, and I'm going to burst crackers. And now while this smog is on, he is in Taiwan, he's posting pictures of, I'm cycling away, it's beautiful and green here. And to me that, he's a low level, sort of, very low level, insignificant guy. But in as much as he's a representative of the BJP, that's the kind of callousness that India has about the reality at home, the BJP government has about the reality at home versus the image we portray of ourselves overseas. And that indifference, because they know they can get away with that indifference, there's something about that that's like very, very galling.
True. Well, look, on that note, first, thank you so much for the contribution from Ayush. That's really, thank you for making the time to doing that. Again, the shout out goes to all our listeners. If you spot something that you'd like to talk about, send us the audio file and we can talk about it. But I hope people in Delhi take care of themselves, and stay safe and breathe easy. That's all we can say literally at this point. Over to you, Rohit.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of echo that. Thanks a ton again, Ayush, and we hope to have more of Ayush reporting on matters in India for our podcast episodes. Thanks to our listeners, and once again, we want to just give a little bit of a shout out to Reddit India. We had a wonderful AMA with several of you earlier this morning, and we'll be back next week. All right. In the meantime, if you're in Delhi, breathe easy wherever you are. Stay safe. Have a lovely rest of your weekend. If you still have some time, or have a great week ahead. Okay? Take care, Vanti.
Chalo, take care. Bye bye.